Welcome to LeCorner, La Source's digital show dedicated to the sport and entertainment industry. Every 2 weeks, we invite a professional to share their experience, background, and challenges. The sport industry moves fast, and having their insights is the best way to keep up to speed. Welcome to LeCorner.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of LeCorner Podcast. This is my pleasure today to welcome Michael from FIFPRO. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Hey, JP. Pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, same. For the audience, it has been quite difficult to manage to get it, but technology-wise, I think we're settled for this morning, so we're good to go, which is tremendous. Michael, before we jump into your daily work and the key issues around the athletes, the data, and the future of the sports tech, I would say around the player concern, it's who are you? Who, where you come from?
Okay, as a brief overview, I guess, well, for the last 3 years, as you said, I've worked as Global Policy and Strategic Projects Advisor at FIFPRO. For those who don't know, FIFPRO are the global representative body. We're a players' union for professional footballers across the globe. Myself, I'm originally from Dublin in Ireland, and I currently live in Amsterdam while working at FIFPRO at the Global HQ. Previously, go ahead.
Yeah, before you joined FIFPRO, even like your career, or I mean, I don't know, maybe the studies. Like, were you down under, or have you traveled? The studies, and in the 20s, what were you up to?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a varied 20s, I guess. I played professional football in Ireland for 10 years first, and then once I retired in 2018, I started putting, I guess, the academic qualifications that I'd done alongside football to better use. And yeah, I spent a year down in Sydney working in a couple of legal roles and building my experience in the legal side of things before then joining FIFPRO in late 2020.
How come you moved from 10 years in Dublin to Sydney?
I wasn't 10 years in Dublin. I moved around Ireland a bit when I was playing football to a few different teams. So I'd lived in a few different places. But I guess just getting experiencing a different lifestyle once I retired. I think any professional sports person to transition from like playing professionally to a normal working life or regular working life, as most people. It's not the easiest thing to do, and it can take time to adapt, no matter how well prepared you are in terms of qualifications or preparations in advance. So I guess I just wanted to experience a different kind of lifestyle while I was doing that. And of course, Sydney's an amazing place to live for anyone who's been. The weather's amazing, and it's a really cool lifestyle. I've been on holidays before, so when I got the opportunity to try it, it was just something I really wanted to do. And then I was able to build my professional experience alongside it. So it's just a really good opportunity.
And actually, how do you, I mean, you've been a professional footballer for like 10 years. Like, do you think about your second life? I mean, the after career, and how do you get prepared for that? Like,
yeah, I guess in one way I was lucky that I was playing in Ireland, which I guess is one of the smaller professional leagues. So you're not making the level of income that you're going to retire on. So you always know that you're going to need your career after football. So I guess it was always in the back of my mind to prepare for that. I did my university degrees and master's degrees early on when I started playing. And then I just kind of had them in the background waiting until I finished. So that made the transition a bit easier once I had those done, and I was able to transition kind of straight into working life a bit. But yeah, the transition's always difficult.
Why legal? Is it a passion of yours, like law or something like that, or was just like you've tested different like fields, or maybe economics or governance, or I don't know, but why the legal side of things? Is it also linked to your professional career and you signing the contract, or being aware of all of that, or was it something different?
Uh, yeah, well, I did my first degree in economics and politics in my undergraduate, and then I did a master's degree in business and a master's degree in law. So I had those kind of subjects, I guess, to choose from in terms of which one to go down, which road to go down. I chose the legal route because I think sport's been probably a passion of mine for as long as I can remember. Obviously, firstly playing, but then I was still very enthusiastic about staying involved in the industry in a professional capacity. Once I did go down that route or that aspect of my career, I thought the legal route was a way that I could actually do that and combine both. I enjoyed some of the legal topics I studied, and I enjoyed some of the legal work, and then kind of becoming a lawyer and then transitioning into the sports aspect of that was something that was quite attractive to me. Ultimately,
and you always thought, like, when you started, you knew. I mean, you said you don't have all the revenue to secure your lifetime, but you were like, okay, I'm going to study to work in sports, or I'm going to study to work wherever opportunities bring me, or was it really like sports oriented from the start?
no, when I first started, I guess it was just a backup plan. There was like a safety net. If football didn't work out, you can always get an injury, or you can lack of form, or you don't get a contract. So I guess my parents would have always pushed me to do out school and then university afterwards to make sure you had your degrees, and that always gives you options going forward. So I guess initially it was just your backup plan, or your safety net for afterwards. And then it was more as I got probably later into my 20s, and I actually tried to map out then what I actually want, what specific sectors or what specific aspects I wanted to work in, knowing that some connection with sports was always interesting to me, but just which niche or which aspects of that were best. Then it's when I started kind of thinking a bit more seriously in my mid and late 20s about how to map that out.
Mm. And you mentioned a bit the transition is like, I've been running like executive master actually for former international players to retire and to transition off the pitch, like on from off the pitch. Um, how was it like? Like, what's the best memory you have, or what's maybe the worst, or how does it feel?
I guess it's when you're a professional sports person, you experience a lot of the highs are very high and the lows are very low. I think regular professional life, it's a bit more balanced. Like if you score a goal or you have a win in front of a few thousand people and they're clapping and cheering you, it's obviously a massive adrenaline rush on the positive side of things. And conversely, if you have a few thousand people shouting abuse at you or clapping when you make a mistake or things like that, it's obviously the complete opposite. Or if you lose and the whole week of training is then geared, or kind of there's a disappointing mood around the training ground and the whole week is geared towards that. And then you can't necessarily always switch off either. When you might go to the cafe, you might go for a coffee when you leave, say, the workplace or the training ground. There's fans in the town that obviously have an interest in the team and they're passionate about it. So you can it's very difficult to get away from. So that's good when it's good and very supportive. But then when it's not so good, it's very difficult to get away from it. So yeah, I think it's the extremes of the highs and the lows. So then when you come into regular professional life, you have to just kind of get used to a bit more balance. But I think it's really good. There's some of the intangible skills I think I learned playing football, and that sports people do when they play sport at a high level. Those intangible skills I think there's a few of them that are really transferable, and it can really help you advance your professional career afterwards if you can kind of channel them in the right way.
No, I agree. I hope at FIFPRO you don't have the same pressure on the Monday morning, like if there are lows or stuff like that. It's not like being a professional footballer, like having 3 losses in 3 weeks.
I always say,
okay.
What's funny, I always say to a couple of friends, they talk about, or I use the analogy, if your boss was standing over you, your entire workday right over your shoulder, like just staring at your screen in case you type something wrong. That's effectively, I guess, what it's like playing in a stadium, that being your job on a Friday night or a Saturday, and everyone watching every single thing you do. So it's just a different level of scrutiny, I guess.
Every mistake's just sitting on the back of you, watching your laptop or everything. No. I don't think I'm good enough, and I would be able to support that. Um, okay, Michael, FIFPRO. Can you? I know you've been like you've just mentioned your role, and you've been presenting a bit the organizations, but can you a bit tell us more what it is exactly and what the role entails exactly?
Yeah, so as I said, FIFPRO is the global representative body for professional football players. So we have 65 member unions across the globe, domestic unions. So each of those 65 countries has their own national union, which will deal with the issues in their own countries. And then they kind of all feed into FIFPRO as the global body that oversees it all. Within my specific role, I work on the global policy and strategic relations team, which basically who are basically responsible for managing political relationships and strategic partnerships with external stakeholders, such as FIFA, UEFA, the major domestic leagues, the World Leagues Forum. And then their team also manages strategic projects with member unions, our own member unions, and internal stakeholders, which can involve research projects or negotiation processes. So the breadth of the work can be quite wide, which keeps it interesting, keeps it relatively exciting. I guess in the first couple of years, go ahead.
No, but go ahead for the first years.
For the first year and a half, maybe 18 months I was here. So I'm here 3 years at this point. The first 18 months or so, I could spread quite generally in terms of my work across a lot of aspects of men's and women's football. Loads of different aspects of the professional game. Whereas the last 18 months or so, I've probably focused more on specific areas. Things like men's player workload and the calendar, which is, I guess, very topical for the top players at the moment. And then, as we've spoken a lot about technology innovation, which then encompasses a lot of our player data management work. So areas like that have probably become more of a focus over the last 18 months.
Yeah, I think these are the key issues. I mean, the workload, the match calendar, but also and that's what we're talking actually today. I mean, all the tech and the innovations happening and how that impact the players and what's the point of view. So for the listeners, like FIFPRO is kind of the equivalent of FIFA. And so you're managing the members just like there are federations. There are also unions protecting the players, and you're working with them like just in the 3 years, like based on your experience, it's what kind of challenges you've encountered along your journey. Like maybe in the first 18 months when it was a bit everything or widespread in terms of topics, but even in the last 18 months when it was a bit more focused on topical issues that are driving the game.
Yeah, there's always new challenges every week. I guess for the listeners that don't know, FIFPRO basically is working to represent the voice of professional players and kind of ensure that players themselves are represented in decision making, which can impact their environment and their industry. For example, in discussions with FIFA, like you said, we don't always achieve it, but that's what we're trying to do. I guess when I tell people, if you tell people you work at FIFPRO, a lot of people outside the industry, their common response you'd receive is, "Oh, why those players are all multi-millionaires? Why would they need a union, or why do they need a union?" When in reality, it's that top, I don't know, a couple of thousands that are making that kind of very high salaries and that kind of life-changing money. Whereas I think we represent over 60,000.
99% are not these players.
Yeah, we represent over 60,000 professional players, and the vast majority of them worldwide are earning a normal, stable wage, I guess, or maybe an unstable wage, but they're earning normal kind of salaries, or even less than normal, what we would consider normal. So there's a lot of problems which then arise across different regions of the world, depending on, I guess, the social environment in those countries, the legal environment, and the culture, different things like that. So sometimes that can also make adopting general policy quite difficult. For example, take the player workload issue. There's obviously all the big leagues that everyone would be familiar with, where men's workload, player workload in men's football is quite a big issue because they're playing too many games. The top players are playing internationals, club games, just constantly not getting enough rest. But then you have other smaller developing leagues who actually probably want to play more games. So underload is an issue there because they want greater opportunities to improve their contracts or their careers. There's more exposure. So they actually want to play more football. So I think it's an example of then sometimes it's very hard to create a global policy as such because you have certain regions and certain markets on the one hand, which have an overload problem, and then some have an underload problem. So that could be a challenge then sometimes devising the policies which could be flexible enough to address the concerns of players in the different types of markets.
Yeah, and I guess as well when it comes to the workload, it's also because you have different bodies having the different competitions. So looking at Europe, you have the Euro for the national teams with UEFA or the Champions League, but at the same time you have the national ones with the Premier League or the League One or the EFL, so the Bundesliga. So I guess you also have for the unions, it's also you have to, I don't know if it's lobbying, but you have to discuss with plenty of different stakeholders with their own views for their own competitions. And that might be also a challenge to navigate from your end too.
Yeah, exactly. I think the football market is very unique and it's so fragmented in the sports world. I think you look at, for example, in comparison to some of the American sports where collective bargaining is more enshrined, and you'll have one league, say like the NFL, and then you'll have one player union like the NFLPA, and they'll frequently argue and they'll frequently negotiate to try and get the best deal for each other or for themselves. But at the end of the day, it's one party negotiating with one party, and it doesn't have that fragmentation. Whereas you say in football, there's a host of different competition organisers from the domestic leagues to continental bodies and to world bodies in international football. So there's a lot of different competitions, which then means a lot of different negotiation partners. And that's a large part of the reason why the calendar has been such a difficult thing to solve or difficult issue to solve, because I guess every organization or every party is kind of looking after their own interests. And there hasn't been a solution reached that we would say for the welfare of the players because of that.
On that, Michael, I was thinking like CBAs, so collective bargaining agreements, have always been, I mean, from our European lens, we've always looked at it as a potential solution, saying like, this could be the way forward because North American leagues are doing it and they are doing it well. But do you think, I mean, I don't know if, I mean, from your own personal views, like to which extent we can replicate that kind of collective bargaining agreement? Is that something, I would not say feasible, but is it something we need to be inspired from? But do we need to tweak it? And if we need to tweak it, to which extent do we need to adapt it to our own situation in Europe? Because I think it's the way it works in the US is great, business first. And as you said, like one party against one party, you know, like you can go on strike, you get the best deal out of it, but you know afterwards that it's done and you're going to work as a professional athlete in the league, and you're going to give like 200% until the next collective bargaining agreement, new negotiation. But I don't know to which extent it is realistically plausible in Europe.
Yeah, I think on a domestic level, it's relatively easy to implement if the will is there to do so from the governing bodies, from the powers that be. For example, to take a country that we have already, say, I don't know, we might pick a specific example, but some countries actually do it quite well already. Australia, for example, we have an Australian union, and they negotiate directly with the Australian League, and they have a CBA between them, and they kind of work it out like that, kind of similar a bit to the American model like you were talking about. So I think at that domestic level, it's definitely possible. It's something we're striving, or our unions are striving to do. Some of them have varying levels, whether it's a complete CBA or collective bargaining agreement, as we phrase it, or if it's a bit less comprehensive, maybe like a memorandum of understanding, or kind of in-between agreements that set out the broad terms or parameters without going to full CBA negotiation discussions. So I think it's definitely possible at domestic level. And as you say, once you get into that continental or global level, it becomes a bit more tricky as there's more parties and a more fragmented environment. But I still think it's possible. I think the players have never really been given a full say or a full voice in the collective decision making. And I think that's something that if the will was there for organizations to integrate the players properly into that, it could be done. But of course, yeah, everyone has their own interest.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. No, national level makes sense clearly, but I was just wondering. I don't know, to have your own perspective, because it's it's not as an easy answer as the situation, or the reality is a bit more complex too, and as you mentioned, like very fragmented. So I was just curious out there. Can
Just
you
the one thing I would
just for
just
the
the one thing I
yeah
would just add on that, JP, would be, I think the role of players, even if you see a lot of the sports business and a lot of the sports marketing studies and stuff or research that's done these days, they all highlight the kind of growing importance of players in terms of the commercial revenue, the commercial success of sports, especially in football. And I think it's probably becoming harder and harder then to discount the voice of the players and not give them the say they want, because it's so tied to the success of the sport, even more so than it ever was before. You see how fans, for example, they constantly follow, or now they follow players much more than teams. You see some of the social media metrics of certain players that far outweigh the followings, or the followings of clubs, even the biggest clubs in the world. So I think the increased, that kind of transition with younger generations is also impacting the essential need for players to be involved in decision making going forward.
Yeah, but clearly players and athletes in general are taking more and more power. The fandom has changed, that's for sure. Way more focused on the players than the team. But the thing is also, I think the players are more and more educated. They also know more and more about the complexity of the industry they are in, but they also become more and more savvy around being investors themselves, or owning teams, or even investing in technology for the player performance or for the product of sports itself in its future. So ultimately, I think players are more and more savvy, and they have more and more power today than they never had in the past. So I think it's important, clearly. But as you mentioned, it's also, I think that's your role also, to make sure you can gather their voices to come together to have even more weight than them being in different markets or different territories, different teams, and trying to push at their own level, but not having the full weight of gathering all of them together.
Yeah, exactly. I think even no matter how much, even the top players in the world, no matter how much money you're making, there's also certain things you can only get done through kind of the collective voice or collective decision making in action. Individually on your own, it's very difficult to make kind of meaningful change across certain topics. So I think that collectiveness, that collective action is important. I'll give you a strange example. When the war broke out in Russia and Ukraine a couple of years ago, or earlier on last year, we got contacted by some of the Shakhtar players who were caught just as the war broke out, and they wanted some of the Brazilian players that were playing Shakhtar, as a group of them, and they were kind of stranded in the country and wanted to leave, but they just couldn't. These are players who are earning like quite high salaries and have plenty of money to ordinarily do whatever they need to do. But it's the example that we were able to help them get onto a train and get out of the country after an intense few hours and days. But it's just an example of, sometimes you can have all the money in the world, you could be a really important player, but there's just certain things that you need a collective voice, or you need collective things to solve it.
Actually, I was about to ask you, like, in concrete way, like what are some of the actions, or even measures that you do to help players, like across the different unions, or in that very specific type of situation as the war that you just mentioned is? Do you have some other examples or items, topics that you push for?
Yeah, I guess just touching on that one thing I mentioned at the start, it's something that kind of social aspect, or the social good aspect, is something that I never really expected when I joined FIFPRO that we were doing that. I thought I was focused on the football part of it. It's not something that I was necessarily aware of that FIFPRO is as evident or as working as cohesively in, but it's something that's actually very rewarding. For example, I personally wasn't involved to much extent, but when the Taliban took back power in Afghanistan last year, or the year before, you'll remember that period of a few weeks where people were allowed to leave or evacuate the country if they could, before they kind of formally took power again. And a few years ago, we'd worked with the Afghanistan women's national team on kind of an abuse case, and a couple of abuse cases to do with their FA, kind of abusing their power towards the women's players, the women's team. So we had contact with them already, and they were contacted by the captain of the team when all of the withdrawals started happening, and we were able to help after a lot of negotiations. I think we were able to help the players. We were able to secure a charter flight, and we were able to help a lot of the players and their families evacuate to Australia. And they a lot of them started new lives in Australia then. So that's just an example of something that I would never have signed up for or didn't think I'd be ever involved in. But then when you play a very small part in that, it's extremely rewarding when you're actually, say, helping people escape persecution or actually life-changing things, rather than we all think. I think, of course, we're all very interested in the sports industry and player workload and these other issues, which take up most of our time day to day. But those other kind of social issues can be extremely insightful and rewarding then when they do happen. But that's on a bit of a tangent there. That's not the main focus of our work, even though it is rewarding. I guess the main focus of our work is around the conditions for players in the game. We have a thing called a policy compass at FIFPRO, which probably explains it quite well, which kind of lists out all of the different policy fields that we're active in. I think as FIFPRO has grown in capacity in recent years, I think we've doubled the workforce over the past 5 years or so. And I guess as the capacity internally has grown, it allows us to be a bit more forward-looking and I guess take steps in advance rather than reacting.
Yeah. I was thinking, Michael, like being forward-thinking, we've all seen it, like technology is impacting us, like ourselves and in the way we work for the past 5-10 years, or I'm not even talking about COVID and the remote stuff and stuff like that, but we know how technology has changed stuff, how we are consuming, how we are watching, how we are playing the game even has completely changed. But even, I guess, the most dramatic change come from the player. So I know you guys have put the player IQ tech, so I will let you a bit discuss or present it to the audience, but I wanted to hear you as well, especially on the measures around the technologies affecting the workplace for football players. I mean, it's always fun to say workplace when you are thinking about a football pitch, but that's the reality you are in. And the guys now, like the way they are going to the training grounds, measuring the sleep before nights, the way they eat, the way they perform every day. I mean, technology, and not even talking just on the business side where what you've mentioned with the fandom, and sometimes one player can be even more important than a team in terms of microeconomics or social media presence. But even just like on a day-to-day at the workplace, I guess this is something you've been following very closely.
Yeah, very much so. It's become a massive growth area of technology and innovation, and particularly player data has become a major growth area for us in the amount of work we're doing over the last 18 months, I'd say, or so. Our work goes on a bit further back than that, but that's really where it's taken a big increase as well. I guess just go back to your previous thing, just to set it in context. I guess people have three kind of areas, broad areas they work across for the players. You have the kind of first basic kind of fundamental part, which is career and conditions, which I guess it involves things like protecting pay, contractual regulations, working conditions for the players, health and safety, things like concussion, medical things, those kind of fundamental workplace issues for football players. Then you have more of the institutional part, which is like the governance mechanisms, whether that's legal frameworks or appeals bodies or CAS or things like that, including protecting right to organise or collective bargaining agreements, those kind of aspects. And you have a third part, as you said there, which is probably more creating a sustainable industry or improving it in certain ways, whether that's through innovation, whether that's through competition design or diversity, quality, inclusion. And within that part of it is probably where that technology and innovation work comes in for us. As you say, the advance of technology and the development of data collection particularly has led to far greater quantities of data, far more technology being used in general across football. So that brings with it inherent risks, but also, as you say, it brings the prospect of advantages for players as well. There's so many different things out there that can help players to get those extra couple of % out of their game now. So it's obviously been embraced then by the industry, by a lot of players, because of the potential benefits it can add. On our point of view, then, there's a big education exercise and a protection exercise to making sure that players are educated on the risks as well as the benefits, and that the framework is in place across the industry to make sure they aren't taken advantage of.
But you can say from your unions that the interest is there. I mean, I guess there are different level of maturities, just like you have in terms of professional leagues and the level at which you play and the financial capacities as well to afford for these kind of technologies to help improve the performance of one player and of a team. But do you reckon? I mean, can you tell us, like, all unions are really fast forward or thinking about it, right?
In which way do you mean? As in just conscious of the topic in general?
When you mentioned the education, because I guess you always have differences and different level of maturities, but I guess all the unions recognize that change and that needs now in terms of like being crucial as part of their work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more and more are beginning to realize it. Their knowledge is consistently expanding. As you mentioned there, we've worked yourselves a bit as part of our Player IQ Tech program, as we call it. Just as a bit of background, we established our FIFPRO's Knowledge Centre, which is called Player IQ, back in 2021. And it serves as kind of a knowledge centre which hosts all of our data-driven research, intelligence for the industry, and strategic support across various issues. And it probably has 4 main components at the moment. One would be a workload tool called the PWM tool, which tracks the workload of maybe 1,800 professional players and helps influence our strategy around that topic, men's and women's football. Then we host a lot of our research and reports, which vary on a host of different industry issues, but they're hosted within the Player IQ Knowledge Centre as well. Then you've got Foresight, which is a forward-looking opinion piece section with different external experts. I don't know if we've got you on yet. Might have had you on, I think, one of the first articles, did we? A couple of you last year. If not, we'll have to get you back soon. And then fourthly, Player IQ Tech is the aspect that we established last year as the fourth component of the Knowledge Centre. But it's basically a structure to manage our technology and innovation work and player data work with our unions and with the broader industry in general. We saw over that period beforehand, we'd kind of been working on different aspects of player data and establishing different technology and innovation projects, but we wanted to put it into a framework where it was quite consistent. So that's why we established Player IQ Tech. And having seen the kind of growing importance of those issues, we wanted to integrate it properly into our strategy, I guess with the ultimate goal of equipping our member unions with greater knowledge of the area, so to enable them then to educate the players on their rights and the risks.
Yeah.
And then also for the unions to be able to negotiate domestically with whether it's the leagues or the FAs or the federations, from a place of having a knowledge base to be able to do so.
Michael, on that, the priority, I would say, because we know the importance of sports data today. So what are the priorities for you for sports? I mean, for football in general, but also for the unions. It's to better educate so that players are better protected and they have a fair share of what's happening and the way their data is being used. What for you? Yeah, top priorities, I would say.
Well, like most fundamental is that the unions and players are educated on and made aware of the related risks associated with the data collection, because, as you say, there's so much data collection happening now in football because of the different technologies that have been implemented and because of the advances in technology themselves. I know we have a slide which you've seen before in a few of our decks and a couple of our workshops regarding the World Cup, the last two World Cups, the Men's and Women's World Cup in Qatar and then in Australia and New Zealand during the summer, whereby 8 million data points were collected per player per match in each game during those two tournaments. And that was done using an optical tracking system in the stadium, which I think you would have seen whose the main purpose was semi-automated offside, or to run the semi-automated offside system to assist with officiating. But if you say 8 million data points are being collected per player per match, that's obviously a very high amount. But we also understand that then in a couple of years' time, by the time the next World Cups come around in 26 and 27, that technology is going to be capable of tracking a far greater number of data points. So that's going to go up even again. So I think that just emphasizes the kind of continued importance of ensuring, there's a certain framework in place to protect players when this amount of data is being collected. But I guess, as I said earlier, I think it's important to remember the uses. We're obviously coming out from a protectionist point of view and an education point of view. So we probably discuss the risks maybe more so than the benefits, because I think the benefits are usually conveyed a lot more easily or a lot more known, whereas the risks maybe aren't always as evident. We call it the camouflage effect at FIFPRO, where technology is often introduced for a certain main use case or example, which does have a benefit for the game and for players, but then it's important of any hidden uses of this collected data or any resulting risk to players that come from that. That's, I guess, what we've been trying to do, work with industry stakeholders, whether it's league, clubs, or companies, private companies in the industry, active in the industry, to kind of create a holistic industry environment where players are afforded sufficient data privacy protections, I guess, while also being able to avail of all the benefits that the technology can offer.
And it's also like, protecting also the next gen of players, because I guess the young kids in the academies or anywhere being scouted is the same as like data is becoming more and more crucial. You've mentioned like how competition, but you can see it everywhere. So yeah, I think it's quite important, but it's still, I guess, complex due to the fragmentation. So that's why I was like luring into that to see what was your position, because just like in the US, you have the CBA. Here it's a bit different, again, between the national, the international level and the different competitions, and also who is also collecting the data and for which purposes. So, but I guess the first work, as you mentioned, is first to educate and make sure you have a framework under which players can be protected and look at in case of interest, but also specific questions on specific matters.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one extra point is probably good to note or just touch on. I think it's the type of data being collected is also important, or the increase in the more sensitive types of data now being collected, kind of enabled, I guess, by the improvements in technology. For example, biometric data or volumetric data just is being collected more rapidly in much larger quantities, and that obviously then brings related dangers as well, because that kind of invasive, quite private types of data.
I guess you guys must be following what's happening also in the industry with the Uber of this world or the Amazon of this world, where data and technology are also being used against some of the employees or on the data privacy side as well. So I guess you have also some interlinks there for the case of the football players.
Yes, correct. I think there's definitely some analogies across different industries. I know from the webinar series that we wrote for the members that you're involved with us in, I think we had one one of the lawyers is working for Amazon workers as one of our guests on one of the webinars, talking about just the different ways that different companies are monitoring or surveilling, I guess, their employees now to an extreme extent in some instances across different industries, and just how invasive it can be. And I think certain industries and certain workers and unions in different industries are now kind of fighting back to make sure that workers are adequately protected. I know in Spain, for example, they brought in it's called the Spanish Riders Law, which is kind of directed at platform workers such as, say, Uber or Deliveroo. But the law is actually directed at the algorithm which runs it, because the algorithm is essentially deciding who gets work and who doesn't. So it's deciding on your employment, even though no one actually knows what the algorithm is or what's in it. So there's just a lot of inherent risks in that if it's not open and transparent, and the workers or the union have no say in that. It's obviously open to bias, or the people that make it, then it's open to bias and other discrimination and other factors. So I think this whole area of other industries and surveillance in general, and AI and the emergence of that influencing your employment conditions, I think it's quite interesting, and there's definitely parallels from across other industries that can be brought into the work that we do in the football context.
No, agree. And I mean, you've mentioned AI and stuff like that. I'm just curious, in the future, I mean, how do you, well, first, like, what's on your radar for 2024? Like, what are the main things or key action items that you're thinking of for 2024?
A more broad FIFPRO level, I guess, in the football industry, I think 3 issues that will be prominent: player data and technology will remain a big issue, if not an even bigger issue, I think. That's going to be a growth area going forward for a while. I think the player workload issue is really coming to a head. I think it's really becoming unsustainable. Now you see the increase in new competitions with the new Champions League coming and the new FIFA Club World Cup. So I think those issues over the year ahead are probably going to remain prominent as more and more kind of top players speak out against the toll it's taking on them. You saw Rafael Varane, for example, was already retired from international football, relatively young. We actually had an interesting stat from a PWM research last year, I'll just briefly mention. It was 243 days recalculated as the amount of days that Varane actually spent in French national team camp between the start of the training camp prior to the 2018 World Cup and the end of the 2022 World Cup, where they were in the final. There's 243 days outside of, say, your regular working job with your club over the course of 4 years, which is obviously a huge amount of time to be away from your family and away from your friends and not being able to enjoy your rest days as such. So just a very high toll on the player's body. But yeah, player workload, I think, will remain prominent. And then I actually think a third area that's worth looking out for, unfortunately, is safe environments or healthy environments in terms of the workplace, as you said earlier, the workplace being the football stadium or this training ground, but also then even traveling to games. We've seen a lot of incidents of either violence or disruption, which pose potential dangers to players, whether that's in stadiums, matches being postponed or abandoned because of fan violence towards players or things like that. Or even, I think lately, even in France, last week we saw an incident with buses, and the buses being attacked by the home fans, the away bus being attacked by the home fans. And it's happened in a few different, there's that example where the match was then postponed prior to it, but there's also a few others of similar incidents while travelling to games or while at the stadium. So I think that's definitely going to be part of the FIFPRO work agenda next year. I think we have a report coming out quite soon on that kind of safe environments and how important it is. But I think that's going to become probably a big area of work as well.
Yeah, plenty on your plate, mate, because the data side of things and the technology is just, the complexity is just going to increase. The workload, as you've mentioned, I think top players are playing more than 70 matches a year, especially when there's Euro or World Cup. next summer will be Euro in Germany, so I guess it will be on the table again, especially for those competing at the highest level of the Champions League and going straight to their camp for the national team. Yeah, I didn't think about the environment safety and the stadiums and all of that, but clearly, I mean, we've seen it increase recently too. So
Yeah, I think it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's not just particular markets like your home country, which does seem to crop up in a few different places. We've seen it. It's in Australia. We've seen it in France, and lots of other European countries throughout the world.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like a specific country issue either. It's just a global kind of worrying trend that's increasing. So it's definitely an area of focus because, of course, we want to protect the health of players. Is the first concern, before we even get into the working conditions and the things on top of that.
Talking about the trends, Michael, what we do, like, because I'm cautious of the time as well. We like to ask our invitee, I mean our speaker, like, if they have to recommend a book or a movie or series, what would it be? What if you have a choice to make, or two choices, let's say?
Let's do a lot of podcasts. Across football, sports, politics, business. So I consume a lot in that way. For a book, I think I would recommend Prisoners of Geography. Right? An author called Tim Marshall. Some people might know the book, but it's a really interesting kind of geopolitical book that basically uses maps of regions of the world. Each chapter is a different region. It explains the kind of geopolitical strategies of those countries and those governments. Including kind of their geographic position and the geography around them, and how that influences then their military strategy or their diplomatic strategies and their diplomatic relations, which provides a really interesting level analysis, I'd say, on geopolitics and why certain countries are perennially at war with each other or in fear of others, or the way certain borders were drawn 100 years ago or 150 years ago and pushed, say, ethnic groups together in the Middle East. And then that's obviously
a good recommendation. It's very timely given the current context.
Exactly. There's a chapter on Russia, which I read the book a couple of years ago. It's not a new book. It's about probably 5 or 6 years old. But there was a chapter in Russia, which was quite forward-thinking. When you view back then what happened afterwards, and there was then obviously a chapter on the Middle East and different things in Africa. So yeah, I thought it's a really, really interesting book.
Okay, cool. I will get the reference. That's quite what I'm interested in too. So thanks, Michael. Yeah, maybe one last question is: do you have anyone inspiring that we should get on the podcast? Like, if you think anybody that you've come across over your entire career as a player, or even your last 3 years at FIFPRO, knows the game or knows the sports, good vision that we should talk to? Do you have anyone in mind, or?
Yeah, probably have a few for you. Someone I would definitely recommend from FIFPRO is Sarah Gregorius. I don't know if you've met Sarah before, but Sarah is our women's football director. Yeah, well, without being around the bush, I think Sarah will become one of the leading female leaders in global sport over the coming years. She's really impressed me since I joined FIFPRO. And she's progressed internally quite quickly to become women's football director last year. So I think she's done really good work, and she's someone who's really impressed me. And then she's also quite good crack, as we say in Ireland, for a Kiwi. So I think she'd be an entertaining guest to have on the podcast. But just be warned, she can be tough to pin down for interviews these days. She's often working on her next LinkedIn post, so she's a busy woman. But she's been instrumental in all of our women's football work over the last 18 months, including the equal pay conditions for the Women's World Cup players and some of the diversity and equality work we've been striving for. So she's very good.
And she's had a lot on her plate with the last World Cup and everything happening since then too. So yeah.
Exactly. You could try to get her on. I'd recommend her.
We will try to find some time in our calendar. Thanks, Michael. Really, really appreciate the time. Really appreciate you being on the podcast, sharing your insights. Really, thank you. Actually, I didn't see the time fly.
No,
It's already an hour, but yeah, thank you for taking the time with us.
no problem, JP. Anytime. Good to speak with you.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoy it as much as we love creating them. If you like the episode, feel free to comment, rate, and share with people around you. You can visit our website, www.lastsource.io, to learn more about our activities. You will discover a wide range of articles and can subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest tech and sports news in your mailbox every month. Stay tuned for new episodes.
Le Corner.